big interview now. Author and life coach Andrea McLean has been a bastion of daytime television for nearly 2 decades. Until, though, she took the plunge, leaving behind Loose Women to focus on herself and her website designed to empower women. But tonight, Andrea is going to be dusting off her presenting skills, hosting a show bringing together TV and West End stars to raise money for Unicef's emergency fund for Ukraine. The show at the Royal Hippodrome Theatre in Eastbourne will be live streamed on stream.theatre. And as the conflict continues to escalate in Ukraine, millions of children and their families are in danger. They remain in danger. The explosions in major cities across the country and thousands of families being forced to flee their homes. Unicef is calling for an immediate ceasefire. Unicef are determined to remain in Ukraine and reach out to the most vulnerable children and families. A warm welcome to Times Radio, Andrea. Really nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Tell me about why it was so important for you to be able to host this event, Andrea.
To be honest, it was an absolute no-brainer. I said yes practically before the words were out. Would you like to host a concert raising funds for UNICEF to help people in Ukraine? Absolutely, I would. For me, so important to do it in a way that children were involved. I heard you mentioning there earlier that obviously there are so many children that have been impacted by this. And what's beautiful about the concert that's happening tonight in Eastbourne is that there are going to be so many children that are taking part in the show, not just going to watch their favorite stars from The X Factor, from Britain's Got Talent, from The Voice, from Strictly, but also taking part themselves. And for me, the strength behind that is there are so many upsetting news stories that are happening. You know, you're talking about them on the radio. Kids are overhearing them. They're seeing them on the news. But it's so important for them to also see that people are helping, that there is help out there, and actually they can get involved with it as well.
And do we have to be careful about how we involve children in this storyline and the way that we talk to children about war? They're obviously involved in the concert, and they'll be aware of what's happening. You're a mum yourself. Have you had that dilemma? How do we make sure that our children know how important this is, but how do we not sort of scare them or gloss over it too much, I suppose?
It's such a balancing act, and obviously not just with what's happening in the Ukraine, but with it happened when we first started going into the COVID pandemic. Children were frightened and concerned and hearing misinformation over social media. And I think that as parents, as educators, as teachers, I think all we can do is, again, it depends on the age of the child in terms of how deeply you want to go into the nuances of exactly what's happening, but to reassure them that yes, this is happening. It's not happening in our home. It's not directly affecting us. And yes, there are children who are being impacted on it. But again, I come back to the first point. What can we do to help? Because if you look at any time in our history when difficult moments have happened, you can always.
Oh, we've just lost your sound, actually. You've
find the helpers. And I think to sort of.
We're back, I think, with you. Sorry, we lost you for a second there, Andrea, but I think we're back with you.
Okay, I'm not so sure exactly how much you heard, but basically it was just to reassure children that every time there is conflict, there are also people who are helping as well, and to reassure them that is always the case.
I gather that you're of Russian Jewish descent on your father's side. And you found out that your ancestors from that side of the family had fled from Russia to Scotland to avoid persecution. Has what's been happening in Ukraine and Russia's part in that, of course, made you think any more about your heritage? It's fascinating.
It's something that has always been at the forefront in terms of when we were growing up. My dad would tell us stories, and we were very aware of it. It's really impacted my dad, and my dad has always had a very charitable mindset. He does a lot of work for his local Rotary Club, and recently he was working to help Afghan refugees who are coming in and now into the UK, and now obviously he's working to help people who are affected by the crisis in the Ukraine. It's something we talk about all the time as a family, and I make sure to pass it on to my kids, in so much, going back to what you were saying before, this may be happening somewhere else in the world, but you know, we are descendants of people who experience this kind of thing. So, you know, don't just think this is something that happens elsewhere.
And what do you make of the UK's response to welcoming people in from Ukraine, taking in refugees into our homes?
It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And, you know, I'm aware that obviously, you know, everyone always feels that there is more that can be done. And of course there is. But let's start with actually what is being done and the kindness and generosity of people who are opening their homes, and even people who are donating in their own unique way, whether it is through donating to charity, whether it's donating blankets and clothing, or going as far as to welcome someone into their home. It doesn't matter how big or small your donation is, if you like, or your act of generosity is. The fact that you're doing something is just beautiful.
And when it comes to hosting the event, do you have to be really careful and mindful of what you say? Is there a tendency, do you think, to be too conservative about what you say, to be too held back? Are you encouraged to be sort of honest with your presentation? How are you going to kind of work that balance?
Well, I'm really fortunate that I've had 2 decades worth of experience in working in daytime TV. So it's like a muscle that is used to being worked, in terms of you can talk about all kinds of incredibly delicate issues with strength, but with a lightness of touch. Because with a daytime TV background, you're aware that although you may be talking about an adult subject, kids can walk in the room at any time. So you learn how to tread carefully with it. So I'm quite lucky, really, because it's something that I won't really have to think about.
You left Loose Women in 2020. And I wondered, sort of post the show, what you make of the show. I think that there's a bit of snobbery out there. People think it's a daytime show and it's, you know, women sounding off and causing controversy on certain things, and that people can be quite snobbish about it, which I don't necessarily think is correct. But I wonder how you see the show. You know, some 2 years after leaving, how do you look back on the show, and what do you think about the place that it has in the schedule? And also, you know, serving a community of people who are at home during the day and want to be watching topical conversations.
Well, for me, when I was working on Loose, and interestingly, I'm actually talking to you from a dressing room at Loose Women. I was actually on it today, this lunchtime.
Okay.
My first time back on the show
Oh,
after leaving.
incredible.
So
Oh, goodness me. Okay. Well,
but
you better be
when
very
I,
nice then.
well, do you know what I would say is you're absolutely right, in terms of people have always had a very quite a snobby attitude towards Loose Women, because it's very easy to laugh at something that that looks so straightforward and easy, as in it's just a group of women sitting around having a conversation about the issues of the day. But what I always felt when I was on it was it holds a really important place in the schedule, because first and foremost, it's the only program that is on live TV that is, you know, that is hosted purely by women for women. I always used to feel really strongly that whilst there were 4 women on the panel, there is a 5th Loose Woman, and she's the one sitting at home, and she's the one whose voice I always tried to represent and make sure that she had a mouthpiece. And I think that's something that Loose Women has carried on doing. It's really easy to take a swipe at Loose. It happened while I was there. It's happened since I've left, and it will carry on. But personally, I feel that that's purely because it's a show hosted just by women. Men don't get the same kind of stick.
Interesting. And the women don't always agree. I'm thinking about the recent example of Charlene White and Janet Street Porter, and there was a feeling of frustration, I think, from Charlene White, because she was pointing out, in terms of the Ukraine crisis, that Black and Asian refugees were not being treated in the same way crossing the border into Poland, for example, as white refugees were. And she wanted to highlight that. And Janet Street Porter essentially said, well, I think Poland's exceeded all expectations, expecting taking in 150,000 refugees. In other words, this isn't a race issue we need to angle at Poland. We just need to be grateful for what they're doing. So there are fallouts between the panel. Do you think Do you think panellists need to be careful about where they go with those fallouts? I don't know whether you saw the fallout between Charlene and Janet Street Porter, and it may have been exploded for the press, as these
Mm.
things often are. But is that an important part of the show?
Well, I mean, no, I didn't see the show, and so and I couldn't comment on two people's different opinions on an episode that I didn't see. But in terms of there being disagreements on it, that's the point. And it's a beautiful thing, especially in this climate, to see a panel of people, regardless as to fact whether they're male or female, having a discussion where there's really opposing views, because that's how you learn and grow, is if you have a vigorous debate with someone who feels a different way to you. If you surround yourself with people who constantly feel the same way, you're shouting into your own echo chamber, and actually you don't grow any further. And the beautiful thing about whether you agree with one person or another, someone at home will have felt that their voice was heard. And again, coming back to the point before, it wouldn't have been seen as people falling out if it was a panel of men. It would be men having a vigorous debate. It's just the language that's used around females having a vigorous discussion.
I'm going to bring in the Oscars moment, actually, just because you're saying some really interesting things about how men and women are perceived on TV. Just to kind of throw this in there, what would have happened if that was a slap between two women on stage at the Oscars last night?
I think it would have been reported very differently. I think that it would have been a woman losing control rather than as Will Smith has since put it, that, you know, he's apologized for his behavior, but he said that he was defending his wife and his family. And I think that if a woman had done it, it would have been treated as hysteria. You know, hysterical woman slaps someone because of something that they disagree with what they've said. So, yeah, I do. I think it would have been reported on differently.
I also wonder whether if it was a woman, they would have been marched out of the auditorium.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
We are going to take a quick pause. Back with Andrea McLean very, very shortly. This is Kate Borsay in for Mariella Frostrop on Times Radio in association with Avanti West Coast First Class. We'll speak to Andrea McLean a little bit more about leaving Loose Women, but also the new chapter in her life, a complete pivot that she's made in terms of her career. We'll be back in a minute. Joined by Andrea McLean, who'll be discussing her new book in just a second. But Andrea's also with us because she's hosting a big event at the Royal Hippodrome Theatre in Eastbourne tonight. It's going to be live streamed on stream.theatre, and it's all to raise money for Unicef's emergency fund for Ukraine, bringing TV and West End stars together. And it sounds like it's going to be an amazing show. Andrea, I know you're sat in the Loose Women studios right now, or in a room off the studio. Tell me what it's like being back. That's the first time that you've been back to Loose Women since leaving.
It was really odd, to be honest. And when I first walked in today, what was so beautiful was obviously there's still a lot of the crew, you know, the people that everyone at home doesn't see, that obviously are still here. So it was lovely. It was very odd walking back on set. You know, the only way I can describe it is it was like being a passenger rather than driving the bus, because obviously I don't have talk back. I don't have a producer talking in my ear. But it was lovely, really lovely. It was nice to be back.
Tell us about the situation surrounding you leaving the programme after such a long time.
Well, in a nutshell, I'd started This Girl Is on Fire nearly 4 years ago now, and I've been working on it on the side, if you like, to loosen in. And it was growing and evolving. It started as an online blog, just trying to help women feel good about themselves. And then it grew and grew, and I was getting journalists from all over the UK, from brilliant publications, were asking to come on board. And I realized that I needed to turn it into a business, because I was turning down sponsors and adverts and all this sort of thing. And I decided to make it into a really beautiful membership where I could keep doing what I was doing, but in a closed community, so women felt really safe and supported. In a nutshell, I was too scared to sort of leave my job and jump all in, because I have bills to pay, I have mortgage to pay. you know, what if the business didn't take off as quickly as I hoped? And then the pandemic happened, and I realized that there were people who were way smarter than me that made huge business plans for 2020. None of them came to fruition. And I thought, I keep waiting for this perfect moment, and the perfect moment may never happen. So I may as well do it now. So I made what I now refer to as, it was just a list, but I now refer to it as my blueprint for failure, which was, okay, what will I do if this goes wrong? Okay, I'll do that. What will I do if that goes wrong? Okay, I'll do that. And then once I realized actually I had a solution for everything that could go wrong, there was no reason to not jump. So I decided, okay. And so I wrote in the notes section of my phone, I wrote a letter. And then when I came off air on one of my shows, I pasted it into my email section and pressed send. And then that was it. I handed my notice in.
People always say that sometimes at great moments of struggle in our life, something good is born out of that. They are, pivots, they are turning points. And it's sort of fair to say that you were pretty exhausted by that time as well. You've described having a breakdown, really, struggling because you were going and going and going. Just talk us through the sort of feelings and emotions at that point for you.
Well, I see myself as incredibly fortunate, because when I had a breakdown in 2019, and it came about because I burned out, and I had been and again, this is something many of your listeners will understand. I hadn't been able to face up to things that I'd experienced. I kept thinking, if I just push it down and I work harder and don't look at it, then it won't affect me. And in the end, it does what it always does, and it bites you in the bum, and it caught up with me. And for me, why I say I was lucky was because it happened in 2019. I was able to, I got help, I got counseling, I was able to really work on myself. And what it meant was, by the time I made the decision that actually I want to go all in working on this Girls on Fire, I already had the tools to understand, right, I'm starting to feel a bit overwhelmed now. What do I do? This is what I do. Right, I'm starting to feel a bit anxious now. What do I do? This is what I do. So I'd already sort of made my toolkit up by the time it came for me to pivot career. So yeah, having a breakdown, seeing it as a lucky thing, is quite odd, but that's genuinely how I feel.
What impact has it had on you in that will you try and ensure that you never get to that point of exhaustion again? Does it inform some of the decisions you make today, or do you feel like it was of that moment, it was of that time, and you've changed so much about your life since that you don't feel like you're going to go there again?
That's a really good question. And I do think that it very much was of its time, because I was kind of lugging around this big handbag full of rubbish with me, because I hadn't dealt with it. And now I have dealt with everything that I needed to deal with. So that's great. And that's parked and put to the side. But we still get moments, all of us as people, we get moments of overwhelm, of anxiety, where we keep going to the point where we're, especially when you're passionate, like I am, I'm working on a new business. When I start to feel myself feeling either that I am overwhelmed or I'm worrying, I know now to go, right, hang on a minute, take a step back, start taking things out of the diary, take a moment, stop, do not spend all hours just sitting in front of your laptop all day because you've got a to-do list that seems like it's never going down. Go for a walk, take a break. So yeah, that moment in itself was a moment in history that passed, but I now recognize in me when I can start to feel things are tipping over a little bit.
You've just released a new book, I know. It's not long out. It's called You Just Need to Believe It. Tell us more about that. It isn't your first book, but this is you continuing the conversation for women, particularly, on trying to, drive women forward and instill some belief in us.
Yeah, the book itself came about because I just felt like I needed to do something brave. I needed to leave and try. And if it failed, then okay, at least I've given it a go. And so many people were calling me brave. And all I kept thinking was, I don't feel brave. I still feel really scared. I just feel like it's this thing that I've got to do. So the first thing I did when it came to
Oh, the line's just gone
working with
again.
my community and
You're
this
back.
Wheels on Fire membership, together for a 10-day challenge about becoming brave. And am I back?
You're back now. Apologies, because I'm shouting at you, and
I'm
then
back.
you're coming
Okay.
back like a minute later. But the line is holding, luckily.
No, it's fine. I understand. No, the challenge that I wrote for my community was a 10-day challenge about becoming brave. Over the course of the past year, around 200 women tried it in my community, and I was blown away by the results that I got. Women literally, through what I was teaching them how to do, learning how to love themselves, to feel confident in themselves, to learn how to take a step back, all the things that I had learned how to do in the previous years. And so what I then decided to do was to dig in a little bit more deeply in terms of the research as to why do these 10 steps that I've given these women, why do they actually work? And I put it together into a book. And it has only recently come out. It was released last week, but already I've started to see some feedback, which is beautiful. Each chapter is a day, so it's a 10-day challenge still. I've had people contacting me to say they've decided to do it as a couple. So they're doing it together with their husband, because it's not purely for women. I've had men contacting me saying that they on their own have been doing it. And then so many women saying, I'm on day 3, I'm on day 4, I'm starting to see a change. And it's beautiful now to see it sort of out into the wider world and not just in my community. It's lovely.
When I first saw the subtitle, Change Your Life in 10 Days, I must admit I was a bit like, oh, come on now, 10 days to change your life. But what you're saying really is that it can be a very small change, right? It doesn't have to be a dramatic life change in those 10 days. And there are 10 steps over 10 days to start making small changes, I suppose. And that's probably a more realistic expectation, isn't it, really, for us to make small changes daily rather than a complete change.
100%. And it's something that's always really annoyed me, in so much as people making huge bold claims in that, whether it's, diet, exercise, whatever, that your whole life will change if you just do this thing in 2.5 minutes and that's it. Actually, it's not. It's always down to the little changes that we make. And for me as well, changing your life doesn't have to be about leaving your job or totally pivoting and going in a different direction. Becoming empowered in yourself can be, I've had women contact me to say, I was too scared to drive because I just felt like I lost my confidence. I now feel like I can get behind the wheel of a car again. I felt agoraphobic because of everything we've been through with the pandemic. I now feel actually confident in myself that I can leave the house. I now feel that I can have conversations with my children or my husband. It doesn't have to be global and huge on a mind-blowing scale. It's whatever works for you.